women are the kind of people that people come out of.
They're just a vessel.
No, it doesn't take any talent to simply reproduce biologically.
Hello and welcome to Unreligiously. My name is Lauren and today we are going to be talking about somebody you may have heard of before. His name is Doug Wilson and he's someone that has recently gone viral because of his new interview on CNN, and it is shocking. If you're anything like me, you might not have even heard of Doug Wilson until his recent viral CNN interview where he calls women the type of people that people come out of. And don't worry, we are going to get through that full CNN interview on here with Doug, but I am also going to give you guys a little bit of an intro into who he is so you have a little bit of context with that commentary once we get there. Bear with me over this short introduction and then it will go into, just my commentary. Before we dig in, I do want to make a quick point, which is that if you do like Doug Wilson or you've read his books in the past or you have felt a pull towards the clips that you've seen of his, I just want you to try to keep an open mind and be curious here. This is not at all me coming at an angle to attack his viewers, because truly so many people have fallen into his fear tactics and his theological traps, and it's not their fault. He definitely created the spiritual minefield by design, and that is his intent when he makes these types of videos, this type of content, writes these types of books. And second, before we get into this video, please like it, please subscribe to my channel or double check to make sure that you're subscribed if you're not already. Please comment down below. You can comment a dove or a white bird. That's my logo if you want to support. That really does make a huge difference, and you guys can always hit share and copy link. You don't have to send it anywhere, I promise, but it does help way more than you think that it does. You just want to take a brief moment to say how grateful I am for all of you here. I just hit 20,000 subscribers, and for those of you who don't know or are new to my videos, I only started making content 6 months ago. You guys have just come in with so much support, so much love. You have shared so many of your experiences with me. Yeah, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. That's enough there. Let's dive into it. This is Doug Wilson, okay? He's based in Moscow, Idaho, and is a pastor and a co-founder of the Communion of Reformed Evangelical Churches. He was only 22 when he married his wife, Nancy, and they've been together ever since. They had 3 kids and a whole bunch of grandkids. I'm not even gonna bother counting. His career in ministry has really been ongoing since that point. That's right, this guy is out there preaching today. He is leading communities of alleged faith, and ultimately, he's forming communities that are pulling essentially from the absolute dredges of ideological society. He's written so many books that I'm once again not going to bother counting, but I am gonna list you guys a few of the titles here so that you can wrap your head around his type of content and his beliefs, because these are pretty direct. So coming in hot, we've got Introductory Logic for Christian and Home Schools, Reforming Marriage, Southern Slavery as It Was. I doubt that it is as it was. Latin Grammar for Christian and Home Schools, Excused Absence, Should Christian Kids Leave Public Schools? Black and Tan, a collection of essays and excursions on slavery, culture war, and scripture in America. God Is, How Christianity Explains Everything. I wish it did. Same-Sex Mirage, and Ride Sally Ride, Sex Rules. Yeah, the list there, it does kind of speak for itself, doesn't it? You can see for yourselves. It really is kind of crazy that people are out there publishing this many books and actually have an audience for them, but this list, go look it up. The list is so long of books that he has written. This guy parrots rhetoric that isn't new and is unquestionably harmful. He makes really uneducated and, in my opinion, really disgusting comments on slavery, saying that it wasn't entirely negative and that slave owners weren't all bad, that there were a lot of great slave owners, actually. He also talks about queer people as if they're bad for society in some way, something that needs to be eradicated, and it's horrific. It's honestly terrible rhetoric. He quotes scripture where God praises leaders for shunning queer folks instead of stoning them to death, and he points at that about how merciful their standpoint of shunning really is, because at least they're not stoning them to death. All right, there's a little bit of background for you. Let's get into the meat of this and dig into the CNN interview, which is what you guys are all waiting for, obviously, and yeah, let's just dive right in.
What makes this community here in Moscow so unique?
You can't make good omelets with rotten eggs, It doesn't matter how good the recipe is. It doesn't matter how good the kitchen is. It doesn't matter how good the cook is. If people aren't walking with God, then it's going to come out bad.
What would have happened if your kids didn't want to follow you?
So this was something, again, that my dad learned from the Apostle Paul, but there were 4 of us growing up in my dad's household, and we all knew that if any one of us walked away from the faith, my dad would step down from ministry.
So you just living as a practicing Christian isn't enough for you?
It's not enough.
We've already covered so much in this interview in like 5 seconds. So he's created this kind of community, as you can hear them saying, and I referenced a community as well. They created this community to really, really separate themselves from modern society and to push away some of these more cultural ideals that they disagree with. I do want to point out the part here about his dad being a preacher and him and his siblings knowing that he would never allow them to leave the faith and what that would kind of do to somebody mentally. It does seem like, obviously Doug Wilson is an extremist. He's somebody who has really extreme views. He is a self-proclaimed Christian nationalist, and that's exactly the type of parenting that would produce that. And so in no way am I giving Doug Wilson a pass here. I'm not a therapist, as you know, if you've watched my videos. That's just my opinion, but I do think it's interesting to take note of that. Listen to what he said there about his experience growing up with his father and what his early relationship to religion really looked like, because I think that it is very telling.
The most noticeable things right out of the gate would be things that aren't going on anymore. We wouldn't have Clown World. We wouldn't have drag queen story hours. We wouldn't have pride parades. We wouldn't have abortion on demand. Those things would be gone.
I don't know what he's talking about, abortion on demand. Nowhere is there like abortion on demand. Him saying that their community could be described better as what they don't have. That's something to pay attention to. He's like, let's actually focus on the exclusion here. What are we excluding? Who is getting excluded? Why are we excluding them? And what type of people does that make us? I think all of that is really important to question when he's talking about this. I do think it's very telling. If somebody said, what's unreligiously about? I would say, well, it's not about all of these people. Let me tell you about all the people I don't like. My channel, and truly it is an attempt to bridge the gap between the secular and religious worlds. I try to explain things in a kind way, in a loving way. I try to explain things with a lot of nuance, with giving people a lot of benefit of the doubt, to the point that if I get any kind of negative comments, it's usually about people saying that I need to go harder on people. It's interesting to me that this is how Doug would talk about what he's created, especially because what he's created is, ultimately a church community. He is a pastor. It just surprises me that he comes out the gate right away swinging with this type of rhetoric.
And that would be, boy, this is different. So the thing that a lot of the people in the middle, let's call them normies, people who are they're not particularly theological, and they're not hard left either. They're just, I just want to live a normal life. Is that so wrong? The last 5 years has really unsettled them a great deal, because Clown World is not a livable place to bring up kids. It's just not. And a lot of the recoil or the reaction that has happened, and a lot of the reason we're getting the attention we're getting, is people are hungry for answers that don't just whitewash it, or that don't sugarcoat it.
I do think people are searching for answers right now because what our parents did didn't work. We're living in different political times, different economic times. Raising kids looks way different than it did 50 years ago. And so I do think that people are returning to more rigid styles of religion for those reasons. At least that's kind of what the research says about it. That's why they're going back to these more conservative ideals. I don't think that any kind of issues are coming from people being themselves, obviously. So it's kind of crazy to me that he's trying to point the finger at queer folks and saying, he just keeps using really horrendous phrasing, like calling this community Clown World. It's disgusting. It just shows the lack of love. You don't see Jesus anywhere near Doug Wilson. You're the type of parent where you feel like these other people are impacting your kids so much. I think that you need to look inward at what you're projecting about. I think you need to look at yourself, what you've taught, why you feel so quickly inclined to point the finger at these other communities. I just think that a lot of these issues, is easy for Christian communities to blame the culture, but they are the culture. Christianity is the largest religious group in the US, and they certainly have the most pull. I mean, we see that politically, we see that in the media, but they love to say that they don't have any control and that they're minorities, which is kind of what Doug Wilson is reiterating with his rhetoric here.
And as I'm fond of saying, it's Christ or chaos. And people say, yeah, looking around, that seems to be the case. And
So you're seeing a big expansion in membership in these last few years, really since COVID, right?
Yes, since 2019, our church community here has doubled in size. During the height of COVID, it was like a refugee column, people moving here.
I don't really like that comparison at all for obvious reasons. But once again, this goes back to people are choosing to do this during uncertain times. People want to go back to having rules because things feel so uncertain. We want to go back to having a clear path, having hope, knowing what's going to happen to us and our family members if we die. All of that stuff is something that we want to have. A lot of those beliefs make up the core of who we are. And so it makes sense to me why people would want to go to a framework where they can just feel or know that they're getting it right. It just doesn't surprise me that this took place during the pandemic, because during that time, so many people were feeling afraid, and especially people that were already afraid of the government or had kind of these conspiracy theories floating around were feeling like they were being persecuted because churches were shutting down. They weren't able to practice religion in the exact way that they wanted. A million other reasons being made to take the COVID vaccine and relating that to a mark of the beast. There are so many reasons. I think once again, this just goes back to the fear that these people have. And that's why I never come down hard on people who believe these things or get sucked into these people's traps, because the reality is that they're afraid and they're getting sucked in because this is someone who's trying to provide answers, and all any of us are doing is trying to find answers. I don't want to give people a pass for spewing harmful rhetoric. I don't ever want anybody to watch my videos and be like, well, I watched this guy and so now I feel ashamed of myself, or now I feel dumb, because he's creating stuff that is going to hook you and make you feel afraid and make you keep wanting to watch or read or buy or participate. That is by design, and that's not your fault.
Chased here by blue state governors, chased here by COVID restrictions, chased here by pastors and elders who flaked on them, who closed their church down. And people, a lot of Christians were discovering that they did not have the Christian leadership that they thought they had.
I actually read a book recently called The Kingdom, the Power, and the Glory. I highly recommend it if you guys are interested in what the state of the American church is today. They talk a lot about how over COVID, a lot of pastors struggle because you have half of a congregation that feels like you observing COVID protocols is you giving up on God and not taking a stand, them wanting you to wade into this political territory when Jesus says, you know, my kingdom is not of this world. Jesus's kingdom is not political. It's not based out of one country. And yeah, it's not of this world. And so a lot of pastors said, we're not going to do that. The Bible very clearly says to follow the laws put in place for you by local leadership. The Bible very clearly says to honor the leaders that have been put in place. And so a lot of churches did follow the rules, but a lot of people did then go flocking to churches like Doug Wilson's because they felt that their leaders were no longer taking a stand for Christ. It's a really dangerous place to be in, because you have pastors who love their congregations then who maybe went against their better judgment during COVID, staying open and preaching about political topics because they didn't want to lose their congregations altogether. It's really, really hard. And yeah, again, the book is The Kingdom, the Power, and the Glory. I'll put the picture up on screen so you guys can check it out if you want. I'll link the Amazon link if you want to purchase it. Another book that I talk about a lot that you guys do ask for the link to is Jesus and John Wayne, so I'll link that as well. I am going to do like book club book reviews on these books that will be coming up in the next month here, so if you want to read those, buy them and read them. You can follow along when I make those videos.
They thought shepherds were supposed to protect the sheep, and when the pressure came, it didn't happen.
Would you define yourself as a Christian nationalist?
Yes.
And how do you define that?
Well, mostly because I much prefer it to the names I usually get called.
How do you define that? Is it you are a Christian and you want this nation to be a Christian nation?
Yeah, I'm a Christian, and I'm an American who loves this country. Mm-hmm. So put those two things together, and since I believe that my Christianity is not something that is to be believed by me behind my eyes and between my ears. It's a public truth.
What do you say to people of different faiths all over the world who
Well,
don't believe that and have a different God, a different understanding of life and how we all came here?
Yeah, I would say let's have a Bible study. Let's talk about it. Depending on what they've heard, I would want to assure them that the fact that we differ over who God is or differ over ultimate reality does not give me warrant to persecute you. So we're going to talk about this because the Christian faith does not advance by the sword. The Christian faith advances by preaching, the sword of the Spirit.
His language is violent in nature. When you look at these groups, they do get super politically involved, and they're very pro-Christian nationalism, which is inherently political. As you continue to listen, you'll just hear lots of statements that do feel like they are precursors to violence, if not violent in and of themselves.
So I'd want to visit with them. I'd want to imitate what the Apostle Paul did all through the book of Acts. He comes to Athens and he preaches Christ and the resurrection to a city full of idolaters, but he doesn't mount a military campaign. Yeah.
What would you say to historic scholars who say America was not founded as a Christian nation?
I would have fun with them.
Don't you think if the framers had the same vision as you, that this is a Christian nation, that they would have made that explicit in the Constitution and not have put in the Establishment Clause and the prohibition of religious tests for office holders, that they would have made it explicit?
Yeah,
It was not explicit. It was not founded as a Christian nation. It never was. Many of the people, the founding fathers, they were not Christians. They had other religious beliefs. I mean, this is an author, just keep in mind, who had a book taken off the shelves because of, misciting things, not citing them, or just incorrect information about American history. And so I wouldn't say it's too far to say that he would even intentionally be mischaracterizing things.
The federal government may not have a Church of the United States. Like the Church of England, the Church of Denmark is the Lutheran Church. They flat prohibited a Church of the United States. And they flat prohibited religious tests for office at the federal level.
Thomas Jefferson, for his part, was a big proponent of religious liberty.
Right.
It was one of his big accomplishments. Yeah. It's on his gravestone that he had this religious liberty law passed in Virginia.
Yeah.
So what would you say to historic scholars who would point to that and say, the framers of this country did not mean for this to be a Christian nation. They meant for it to be a nation where people can exercise their religion freely, no matter what that religion is.
First, I would invite these historic scholars in the most friendly way possible to have a public debate on the subject. I think I don't want to, King Ahab in the Old Testament says, let not him who puts on his armor boast like him who takes it off. But I think I would do okay. And I think I would do okay because I'd be able to point to the primary documents as well.
How would a Muslim...
The primary documents may reference Christian language, but that doesn't mean that we are a Christian nation.
Or a Mormon or even a Catholic fit into your version of a Christian nation.
Yeah. So one of the reasons we have such problems with assimilating Muslims and all these different Hindus is that there are so many of them, right? So if we had a Christian republic and a Muslim came to Disneyland with his family, we have no problems. But when they fill up Dearborn, Michigan, that's just not. You can. It says in Amos 3:3, can two walk together except they be agreed? You cannot put alien worldviews together, cheek by jowl, and have peace. Right.
The Bible also says, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. The Bible also says to love yourself and your neighbor. God says there is no Jew or Gentile. The Bible says a lot of things that would directly conflict with what he's saying, and I just want to point that out here. I'm not denying that there is a version or interpretation that looks like Doug's, but it's really harmful. It's not based in what we know to be true about the world or about things, and it also isn't really even biblically true if you actually study the scripture. So I think that's one of the most alarming things to me about Doug, is that people who don't know the Bible, don't know their scripture, don't know the history, might listen to somebody like Doug and not know better. They might not know that what he's saying is just absolutely incorrect. They might listen to him and go, yeah, this is a Christian nation. Yeah, of course, people all know the story of the Pilgrims coming over for religious freedom, and so you just assume that they were all Christian. That might just sound right to you, but the reality is it's not. And it's important to actually go back and look at what really has happened, the reality of history, and also the reality of scripture too. I'm not a Christian, but if you are, the Bible should be a resource for you. And I don't think that what Doug is saying here is something that you can really argue is an accurate view of faith. This interviewer, in my opinion, is doing a really great job of pushing back on that and saying, what about historians and scholars who would absolutely disagree with you? Doug doesn't come back with any sort of real facts. He just says, well, I think I'd be able to take them. And to me, that is just really, again, telling, because he doesn't come backed up with information or facts, and that's because I don't believe that he has any.
Basically, I think a lot of the religious turmoil that we have, the clashes that we would have, could be addressed by a sane immigration policy, not a policy that tries to regulate what people can say or do in their religious convictions while here.
No one is trying to regulate anyone's religious convictions while they're here at all. These are non-issues.
So the foundation for you is you believe this is a Christian nation,
right,
despite the debate from historic scholars.
Exactly. But notice that when the Muslim says to me, who are you to say? I can say, all right, we have to live together. Who are you to say which way it should go? And then the secularist comes in and says, let's do it this way. And Muslim and I would both turn to him and say, and who are you to say?
So you feel like we can't have a functioning society?
Yeah, we can't.
Without.
And look at our society currently, not functioning.
Do you believe that secular society is basically a religion of its own that is the antithesis of your
Correct.
Christianity?
Secularism is a religious faith.
This is something that has been parroted by Jordan Peterson and other people like him, other Christian nationalists, and it really confuses me every single time. They just want to believe that everybody is religious, everybody has a faith. It's really just not true. It really just describes your outlook on not having a belief, and that's it. I get that it's really hard for people who have always been religious to maybe understand what the absence of having a religious practice, what that would even look like. But these people are not, secular people are not a religion of their own. They're not. It really is a point that these people try to make to other people who don't subscribe to a religion and make them feel scary. Believing that there is this, all the secular people are out to get them, they're organizing, or it's their own type of religion that they're trying to combat. It just fuels the fire for them in what they believe is biblical truth and what's going to happen and how the world is going to respond to them if they're on the right track. And so it is murky territory, because if you come down too hard on them, you are just adding into the persecution. But if you say nothing, then you also allow it to continue happening. And so, yeah, I just think it's interesting how much of this othering language Doug uses. It's pretty poorly concealed, thinly veiled.
Religious commitment. Remember what I said about if there is no God above the state is God. Mm-hmm. Well, if that's the case for the secularist, and I believe it is, and it's a religious level commitment, then who's in charge of the current secular God?
And how much...
Once again, people just have a hard time fathoming this, and we see this in the comments of the videos that I've made. Maybe I'll link them at the end, but if you want to look them up, it's me responding to angry comments or me responding to Christian comments. A lot of the comments are people assuming that I do in fact believe in God and am then rejecting him. I don't believe in a God. That's what makes me an agnostic atheist. I don't believe that there is a God. That's just for me personally. I will keep an open mind. I'm not against there being a God. That's just not what I believe right now. And for him, he's well, they have their own religion. They have, who's in charge of the secular God, meaning who's in charge of the secular moral hierarchy. Well, we believe that people are capable of managing themselves. We believe that people are capable of being good human beings, of knowing right from wrong. Even different animal groups have morals that they follow, and when one of those goes off the rails, it's weird in that animal community. And we have the same thing with humans. We have people that, generally speaking, people know right from wrong, but things can go wrong, whether it's nature or nurture. Something can go wrong mentally, emotionally, whatever. People can act out in violent ways, people can act out in bad ways, make bad decisions for themselves. But we see this moral guiding hierarchy. It's in every single animal group, every social group, and we see it, with humans, of course, even more so. And so we don't need these books to tell us how to behave. I don't think that if there wasn't a Bible, there would be like way more war or something like that. I do think that the Bible can be a helpful tool. I think religion can be a helpful tool. I'm not here to minimize anyone's sort of like religious experience, but I just wanted to point that out.
Millennialism belief driving all of this.
Great deal of it, yes.
Tell our viewers about that, what that is.
Most American evangelicals are premillennial, meaning that they believe everything's falling apart, and when things get really bad, the Antichrist is going to take over, and then Jesus will come again and save us from all that. But it's a pretty grim view of human history between now and the end. So that's the premillennial understanding. A postmillennialist is someone who believes that the gospel is going to be victorious in the world. The nations will, in fact, be discipled.
And you have said, I don't have a direct pipeline to Pete Hegseth.
Right.
But don't you think your influence is having an impact right now?
I hope so. I write books, and I don't write and publish books to launch them into the void. I want people to read them and be influenced by them.
And like I said, he's written a lot of books.
Mm-hmm.
And when people read them and are influenced by them, and they're in a position to actually do something, it's gratifying. I'm happy about that.
Because for many years, decades frankly, your views were really seen as fringe.
Yes.
Now do you see
Not by
them?
me, not by my wife.
Not by you or your wife or your community, but
I'm really glad that Nancy doesn't see him as fringe. Maybe I need to look a little bit into Nancy, because I know she shouldn't be totally responsible for her husband's actions, but based off of him speaking and what I've seen about Nancy, she's like right in lockstep with him.
Yes.
They were seen as fringe. Do you now see them becoming more mainstream?
Yes, I do. My views on a number of things have become steadily more mainstream, and have done that without me moving at all.
Yeah, so I think we've all seen that happening. The current Trump administration era right now, we see people feeling more comfortable saying horrendous things, giving horrendous takes, being uneducated on topics if they feel like it doesn't affect them.
You think people have come to you? They've come to yours.
So basically, what has happened as the whole zeitgeist of the official zeitgeist has moved steadily left into more and more woke territory, a number of normies, as I called them earlier, looked at where that was going and said, I don't want to go there. And so maybe we ought to give that Wilson character a second look.
It is scary to see. It feels like we are backsliding in a lot of ways. And if you've watched other videos of mine and you go look at some of the old news footage that I'll put in from, people talking about religious topics back in the 80s and the 90s and the 70s, it sounds like the exact same conversations that we're having today, except for then people spoke about those topics respectfully and with compassion. And now people are using really just demoralizing language. They're using put downs, they're using insults, they're trying to other certain groups of people. To me, that's what's actually gotten worse. I mean, these things in culture that people want to say are new and are taking over, it's not. It's not new. It's not taking over. It's not anything different. People just are able to talk freely about their experiences now, and there's nothing wrong with that.
You think people have come to you? They've come to yours.
So basically, what has happened as the whole zeitgeist of the official zeitgeist has moved steadily left into more and more woke territory, a number of normies, as I called them earlier, looked at where that was going and said, I don't want to go there.
I think this is true on both sides. There were a lot of people during the pandemic who might have been more in the middle, but then saw how people responded to COVID and were like, I do not want to be associated with that. And they went way more to the left. And then you have people who also did the same thing on the right. And once again, this just goes back to the fear that people had and these religious groups monopolizing on that fear to get voters in their churches, to get voter turnout. This is all a political scam. It truly is. Look into it. Once again, I'll link those books, Jesus and John Wayne, and then The Kingdom, the Power, and the Glory. Those are really good books about what's going on politically in the churches in America today.
He sounded pretty crazy 20 years ago, but I'm rethinking that.
And what are you seeing happen in the Trump administration right now that reflects your Christian values?
The series of appointments in the federal judgeships that led to the overturning of Roe would be the central thing. If our church doesn't have a spire with a bell in it yet, but if we had the bell, that would have been, when Dobbs came down, we would have been ringing it all day.
And you want to see Obergefell?
I want to see Obergefell go the same direction. I am very pleased with the naming of just the fraudulent behavior that has overseeing the squandering of trillions of dollars.
Once again, my kingdom is not of this world. This is scripture, you guys. And why are we talking about politics? It's not right. This should be setting off immediate warning bells in your mind if you're a believer and you're watching this. They should not be talking about politics. You are capable of going to a church and getting spiritual leadership and guidance and forming your own opinions and beliefs about things through your own relationship with God, with Jesus Christ, with whoever your higher power is, and then determining who to vote for based off of your own convictions, your own experiences, what you're seeing around you, based off of your own valid research, okay? You do not need to be told who to vote for by a pastor. Actually, Jesus, time and time again, kind of tries to push down some of the tension, the political tensions going on around him, and saying, just give pay your taxes, do what they say you're supposed to do, honor the leadership that, God has put in place in your government, but also, serve the Lord and whatever. You are not fighting a political fight. If you are a Christian, you're fighting a spiritual fight, and no one has an issue with that. But I do think once you start getting into politics, it gets a little bit hazy for people, because when they talk about Christian nationalism, they describe it as if you are a Christian who also just lives in America and votes based off of their beliefs. And I think a lot of Christians probably struggle with that because they're like, I don't like all of this Christian nationalist talk, but I do, of course, vote according to my beliefs and my convictions and my religion. And I think that's so normal. And I don't think that we need to demonize people necessarily just for that fact alone, right? We all vote based off of what we think is right, hopefully. But where Christian nationalism, in my mind, crosses that gap or crosses the bridge into more dangerous territory than just voting along with your convictions is this sort of mandated belief, like you have to, if you are a Christian, you have to vote in the way that the church, the Christian American church, wants you to vote, that you are required to view things a certain way, that you should conflate politics, that you should make rules for other people based on your personal convictions. And most Christians, I don't think, really do that. Most Christians don't want to push their own personal rules and guidelines onto other people. Even the Bible says not to judge non-believers in the same way that you would judge a brother or sister in Christ, not to correct non-believers according to your own rules, right? This is all in the Bible. And so yes, there are multiple ways to look at this, but it's not accurate to say that there is this need that if you're a Christian to try to force these views onto other people. I would actually argue that it is anti-biblical. It's unbiblical to behave in that way. But then you have people like Doug Wilson or other preachers who are going on these shows talking about different political candidates because they're being paid by those political candidates. They're trying to get those candidates in office. They actually have a clear agenda here. And I think that that's really disingenuous, especially to people who are coming to Doug as a pastor looking for spiritual leadership.
One of my old jokes was that I'm opposed to chaplains praying at Congress, because the Bible says not to turn a den of thieves into a house of prayer. And it's just the pillage that is going on there has been remarkable, and I'm just very gratified at the efforts of Doge and other things like that to put a spotlight on those sorts of things.
And what about...
And what sorts of things? I feel like he throws out, I don't know if this is the way that CNN has edited it. It feels like he kind of throws out these random, but like, what does Doge have to do at all with how he sees his faith reflected in the current administration? I just feel like he's throwing out buzzwords.
Banning transgender military members.
Oh, that's great.
You think that's great?
That's absolutely great.
And gender
issues.
Gender issues.
You guys, I'm not going to go too into this part on the trans military stuff. Obviously, I don't think that that's right. I don't understand why that is a move that's being made, and I also need to do more research on where we're currently at with that before I speak on it. I do want to do videos more on queer experiences, and you guys have asked for it, and you've also noted the absence of me talking about it in some videos, and I just want to say here that that's not because I don't care about those topics, and it's not because I don't think they're worth talking about. I actually do have dedicated videos on those types of topics, but I just want to make sure that I'm really doing my research because I, grew up in a deeply evangelical home. I grew up homeschooled, and after that, I did go to college. I did move to California. I moved to Colorado. Like, I've moved around, and I've read a lot, and I feel like I've expanded my understanding of things a lot in my worldview, but there's still a lot that I'm learning. And I know that I tell you guys in every video, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a professional, but I don't want to bring you content that isn't accurate, isn't going to accurately reflect your experiences, is going to mislead people, especially on topics like that where I think people already have had enough harm and damage around faith-related topics in these communities. He's obviously wrong here. I obviously disagree, but keep an eye out for videos that are more dedicated on this, and if you want to help, there is a way. Once again, I don't have these experiences personally, and that's why I really do hesitate to speak on them. It's people also will ask me questions like, why do you only focus on Christianity? And the answer is I do have videos on other religions, I have videos on cults, and I do have a video talking about Islam, but I get other people to come in and share their experience if I'm going to do that for the most part, because I want it to be, again, accurate and from the people who have actually experienced it. I don't want to just be talking out of my ass to you guys. So I'm not going to bring you content that isn't written by me, researched by me, done well. Anyway, you can help me. You can fill out the form that's in the description of my channel and share your story. If you have experience as a queer person or specifically as a trans person in the church, I would love to hear more about it, and I would love to have you be a part of a future video. I do really want to get those insights and collect those stories to make a meaningful video for you guys because, yeah, I just can't bring that first person experience to it. So let's keep going here.
As I mentioned before the interview, I was in the submarine service, for example, and whatever idiot thought of putting women on submarines.
Sounds like a confession. Does that sound like a confession to anyone else?
Well, what would you say to a female submariner who's been doing the job and kicking butt doing it?
I'd say, yeah, we don't want you down here kicking butt.
Why?
I went to sea a couple of times. Mm-hmm. We were submerged for 2.5 months. All right. 2.5 months, let's say 130 guys in a submarine with 3 women on it, okay? So let's put 130 horny sailors and 3 women and submerge them out in the middle of the Atlantic for 2.5 months. What could go wrong? I'd say, come on.
There are really high rates of sexual assault in the military, and that's something that needs to be dealt with, not by just kicking women out of the military. It's crazy to me also that he's wording it like this. He's acting like it's just a given, like any man locked down for 3 months would, of course, assault one of the women on the submarine. And that's crazy to me. I don't like how he phrased that. Let me know in the comments if you guys see that similarly, but there's so many... It's so hard to watch this because this video is already at 52 minutes, just so you guys know. I'm going through, and like editing these chunks in as I make it so I can keep an eye on how long it's getting, and it's already 52 minutes. I already have another 22 minutes that needs to get put in. This is already going to be probably another 10 minutes. And it's like, I can't make this a 2-hour video responding to every single comment that he makes, but really pay attention to the wording, really think about it, because so many of this I do think is a dog whistle. And yeah, I can't stop every sentence, but that doesn't mean that I'm not hearing this. And I hope that you guys are also hearing this, because yeah, we just can't, I literally can't stop every single sentence, but everything that comes out of his mouth is just insane.
You have a patriarchal view of how society should be.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, there's certain places that ought to be male-only spaces, and combat is one of them. And being closed up in a submarine is another one. And so what it boils down to is that sort of thing. Egalitarianism has been the basic platform, and feminism is a subset of egalitarianism, and you can't split the difference on this sort of thing. So if you're going to have a submarine, you have to make a decision who's going to be on it, right? And either the secular egalitarian worldview will prevail, or a patriarchal Christian worldview will prevail.
I don't think that the military is trying to save anyone's feelings or anything like that when they're picking who's going to be on these submarines. I think they're picking the most equipped person, the person who is ready, who's next up for the job. I don't think that the military is just sending people into the ocean for funsies who aren't equipped, who aren't, capable of doing the job. I don't like to hear him diminish female or queer service members in this way. It feels wrong. And most of the men that I know, and I say most really all that I've ever heard talk about it, most because I just haven't heard all of them talk about it, but when I've heard any man who's been in the military talk about experience with either queer folks or women in the military, they are talking about what badasses they are. They're talking about how much respect they have for the women that are doing it, how much respect is really the word, almost like these women they're working their asses off. These people are working their asses off, and these queer people are working their asses off. Like, they're doing a great job. This questioning of like women being in the military, I wonder if this isn't more of a Christian nationalist talking point, because I don't actually hear service members talking about this. I don't know. I hope that I'm not saying anything that's like offensive here. I'm trying to say this as carefully as I can, and I hope that it's, received in the way that I'm trying to have it be received. It's not something that service members are asking for reform to, and I think it is just a way to exclude people and to separate people.
Or a patriarchal Muslim view. Somebody's going to have to decide.
But bottom line, do you believe men and women are equal in society?
Well, they are in our society, but they're not.
I know what he's going to say here, and it's going to be that women aren't equal. They're not equal. They're equal in value, but not equal in role, which we hear really frequently in fundy spaces or evangelical spaces. It's this idea that our value is the same to God, but our roles are not the same. Our intellect maybe isn't the same. The way that we use our leadership skills are not going to be the same. And I don't think that that's fair. I think that women should have the option and the opportunity to do whatever they want. I do think it is true in some circumstances for some men and for some women, they may have different abilities or capabilities, but I don't think that that is true across the board and or based on your sex or your gender. Like, I agree with it in word very broadly only, but the way that these people actually try to apply it is by saying, well, women and men are equal in value, meaning to God, but women's job is still to be in the kitchen. Essentially, women's job is not to go get an education. Women's job is really not to be outside of the house. And they'll really try to skirt these points saying, well, we're not necessarily saying that it should be illegal for women to work. So we're not saying it's the worst ever, but the truth is that in the society that they want it to be stigmatized. They also do make it sound like feminism does stigmatize women for wanting to be stay-at-home moms. I don't see this happening. I don't know if I'll ever have kids or not, but if I do, I think I probably would want to stay home with them while they were in their daycare years, like early ages, pre-elementary school. And if I did that, it wouldn't even cross my mind that people might judge me for that. It just seems like a personal decision about like early life care for children. So I think that this is a talking point that Christians use a lot, but I would be curious from your perspectives. I mean, have you guys, if you've had kids, have you faced judgment for choosing to stay home? Because yeah, once again, I just don't see that. I guess I do see some rhetoric online regarding the privilege of being able to stay home, and a lot of families pushing back on that and saying it's not really a privilege. It is a choice. It is a struggle that we're going through to, prioritize certain things for our family. And I can see an argument for that too, being like, it's not always a privilege per se, but at the same time, it is a privilege because most families cannot live on a one income household, especially with children. So having the ability to make the struggle work is still a privilege in and of itself. Maybe I'm getting off on a tangent a little bit here. Let's go back into what Doug Wilson is saying about gender and what I think he's about to say, which is that we were created equal in value, but not equal in role.
Not equal in the world.
What do you mean by that?
Because men and women are different. They're just different. When I said I don't want women in combat, it's not an arbitrary rule. It's not like we want the women to stand on this side of the room and the men to stand on that side. There's certain things that men do better than women do. There's certain things that women do better than the men do. And I think we should let Scripture and natural revelation tell us which is which.
There are certain things that some men do better than some women, and there are certain things that some women can do better than some men. That's my personal opinion. I do think that there are, for a lot of reasons, there are different industries that are male-dominated or female-dominated, and I don't think that's because women are naturally pulled towards education more than men are, or nursing more than men are, or whatever the, child care, daycare is. Like, I don't think that the reason for that is because women are just more called to that than men. I think that it's more socially acceptable for women to do those types of jobs. It is more expected. I think it's just a continuation of that, people following their parents' footsteps. But people are breaking glass ceilings everywhere. Women are infiltrating men-dominated spaces. Men are coming into teaching more and more, which I think is incredible. Men are coming more into health spaces. That's incredible too. We need all genders in all spaces. I don't think that we should try to exclude anybody. I think that all voices are going to be important. And more importantly, there's going to be students or patients or clients or whatever who are also from all of these diverse backgrounds and would really benefit from somebody being open and kind and non-judgmental.
Men are good at smashing and breaking things. They're good at fighting. And when you have this egalitarian dogma that women and men have to be the same, what happens is it's like saying everybody has to be able to dunk the basketball. If you've got an egalitarian dogma that says everyone has to be able to dunk, the only thing you're going to wind up doing is lowering the net.
Yeah, we're not saying everybody has to be able to dunk. I feel like that's a really weird metaphor, and this is something that I see a lot with these types of Christian nationalist people, is that they will use metaphors that maybe if you're not listening super closely or you're not trying to be listening critically, it can feel like it's a good metaphor. Like, yeah, like not everybody can reach the hoop, and so we don't lower the hoop to make it easier. It's just some people are not going to be as good at basketball. But that's really not what we're talking about. We're not asking people to lower the standards in the workplace for women. We're not asking people to lower the standards in the military for queer people. We're not asking, whatever it may be that their talking point is. No one is asking for the overall standards to be lowered. It's saying for the people that can meet the standards in these other groups, they deserve to be able to have the same opportunity as men. And so for the women that can dunk, the real metaphor would be like everybody that can dunk should be able to dunk if they want to. But for anybody except for men, we're going to take the hoop away. That's kind of like a better metaphor in my opinion. But just keep an eye out in all of these types of conservative spaces for the metaphors that they use, because it's really not accurate. I get what he's saying, but once again, we're not lowering standards for men. We're not lowering standards for women. We're not lowering standards in the workplace. We're not lowering standards. And I just think that this is really inaccurate and harmful.
And so consequently, you've got firemen. One of the things that Pete Hegseth has done is instead of making a regulation concerning the women, he just said, we're back to a uniform standard of fitness for going into certain avenues, certain places. And that de facto is going to exclude many of the women, right?
But do you think the underlying premise was what you're saying? Women shouldn't be in combat.
Correct.
Our viewers might hear that and think he wants to turn this into a totalitarian, patriarchal society. He wants to turn America into Gilead with handmaids.
Right.
What do you say to that?
Him saying right after that is terrifying, honestly.
What I want to do is keep women out of submarines, which
I see this all the time with these people, and he did this earlier, and I know I commented on it. I'm going to see if I can't really remember exactly what he said. Oh yeah, when he was talking about freaking Dogecoin, and she's like, you know, how does the current administration reflect your Christian values? And then he randomly threw out Doge, and it's like, what does that have to do with this? This clip reminds me of that, where it's like, this just really doesn't have anything to do with what you're talking about. Let's watch it one more time.
what I want to do is keep women out of submarines.
Yeah, so it's like, obviously right now, she's not asking him specifically his opinions on if women should be allowed to participate in submarine trips with the military, with the Navy, with whatever. I obviously don't know much about the military. He's saying, well, no, I'm just trying to keep women out of submarines. No, you're not. You're trying to say that women shouldn't be in the military, women can't be in combat, that queer people, trans people shouldn't be in military or combat. You're trying to say that to make it possible for people who do qualify to participate in these things, that to do that is essentially lowering the hoop, lowering the standards, which is just not the case. They just throw things out there. And I think, again, if you're not listening critically, if you're not listening to analyze it and to understand and say, I need to fact check that, then this can sound like it makes sense. It can sound true, but it just blows my mind that people like this are allowed to speak and allowed to interview without having any kind of fact check on them.
It's not totalitarianism.
That's one example.
Right? It's you've got to decide which way you're going to go.
Jordan Peterson does this too. You've got to decide which way you're going to go. Sure, you have to decide which way you're going to go, but you can't sum it up as, well, all I'm saying is women aren't going to be, I don't want women on submarines. That doesn't equate to you need to decide which way you're going to go, nor does that answer the question, which is, do you actually believe that there should be like these gendered rules, legal guidelines about where and how people are allowed to work of different genders or sexualities?
Send Bruno into shower with the junior high girls, and you force that on them, and you arrest parents who protest at the school board meeting. I would call that totalitarian. And what I'm trying to I'm not fond of quoting Vladimir Lenin positively, but he once said, whom? Mm-hmm. Who's doing what to whom? So when someone says, oh, you're imposing on the woman who wants to be a fighter pilot or who wants to be a submariner, you're imposing on her, I say yes, but what you're doing is imposing on other people. Mm-hmm. You're imposing your worldview on other people.
Once again, I hate to be so repetitive, but this is something that we see really commonly with these types of people. I did do a video on Chi Alpha. It's a college campus group that I believe functions very similarly to cults. And I actually interviewed an older gentleman, a pastor who previously led some of these groups. And he said to me, you say that we are being intolerant, but the truth is that you are being intolerant of our intolerance. I didn't really comment on it to him because I just know that it wasn't going to go anywhere. But saying you're intolerant of my intolerance is really not the comeback that people think that it is. And I believe that's kind of what he's saying here. Let's replay that clip again.
I say yes, but what you're doing is imposing on other people. Mm-hmm. You're imposing your worldview on other people. I
mean, no one is trying to actually impose their worldview on other people. People just want the same opportunities that men have, that straight white men have. And I think that we are getting closer to that, but people like Doug Wilson are actually trying to go back in history and take a lot of this away, and we're not there yet. We have so much more work to do. And so, yeah, he just is really missing the point here. When they're being intolerant, they're trying to prevent people from opportunities. When I'm not tolerating their intolerance, that just means that I disagree with them and that I'm willing to say that out loud. So it's really not talking about the same thing.
There's no way.
So you see it, they can't coexist.
There's no way that antithetical worldviews can exist without one imposing on the other.
But why isn't it enough to have this community here in Moscow? You've built this Christian community. Why isn't it enough to just live that way and let everyone else live the way they want in America?
I think that's the question that really shows the difference between normal Christianity, normal religious belief, and Christian nationalism. Because what she's asking there is, why isn't it enough to just be with your community of believers? Why do you have to do all of this extra stuff? And I don't know what he's about to say, but I can guarantee that it's going to go into some Christian nationalist rhetoric, because that is just, unfortunately, the reality of what Doug Wilson believes.
Oh, we're happy to live that way as long as they let us, right? But it's not going to shake out that way.
What do you mean?
It's got to give at some point, right? So here's an example. The logic of egalitarianism means that our daughters are going to be drafted at some point to go fight in some stupid foreign war.
So you see
People love to bring up this point too, talking about the draft. Pearl Davis is someone who frequently brings up the draft, saying, well, women don't want to get drafted either. Sure, if that's what it comes down to, for women to be able to have jobs, have a bank account, be able to leave their abusive relationships, be able to take care of their kids when the husband is, or partner, or baby daddy, whatever, isn't stepping up to be able to have their own life and freedom, then yeah, sign me up for the draft. But also, I think feminism would say that people shouldn't be forced to do things against their will. Feminism would say that the draft is kind of inherently anti-feminist. And feminists, a large part of feminist theory is talking about how feminism also harms men, how feminism is also bad for men. And so this view just tells me that he doesn't really understand feminism.
the slippery slope.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've lived on this slippery slope my entire life.
But other people might say, well, there's a slippery slope with your view that women's rights are just gradually taken away, for example.
Sure, but the slippery slope that I'm talking about is the one that we're actually sliding down.
He's saying right now women's rights aren't actually being taken away, which is just, laughable. Look at the state of reproductive care in the U.S. Look at the Trump administration trying to take away same-sex marriages or handing that back to the states. There's so many things that are going on right now that are hurting not people like Doug Wilson. And so for him to still feel like he is the one being persecuted and he is the one that's being targeted by culture, by society, by the government, it's just frankly hilarious.
So the thing
You don't think they're sliding down your slippery slope?
No, I don't. Now, I do believe, let's put it this way. I do believe that there have been instantiations of Christianity in politics that have gone very badly.
Like what?
Spanish Inquisition, or
Okay.
there are things like that I think, okay, that's no good, and we should never do that again. I'm an advocate of Christendom, but the first Christendom had some warts, that had some things that we don't ever want to do again. So there are slippery slopes on the Christian side of things, and I think we should guard against those things. But right now, that's not anywhere close to being our central problem.
I feel like where Doug Wilson is at is like almost the bottom of the slippery slope. How could you go much further than him and his beliefs? And frankly, we haven't even gotten into some of the most horrendous parts of this interview yet. It really is worth the watch. Hang out. He just keeps saying more and more egregious stuff as he gets more comfortable with this interviewer.
You basically think you're David and Goliath.
Yeah.
So over my shoulder right here, there is a poster of the cover of a book, and it says, "It's good to be a man."
Right.
What does that mean?
It means that that book is an argument that is a defensive reaction, defending young men who don't know who they are because they have been taught their entire life that white heterosexual males are cancerous. So masculinity is tagged as toxic masculinity.
I hear this point a lot, and I don't want to minimize any men's experiences because I'm obviously not a man and I don't know what it's like. And I have actually heard similar views from people that I care about and love, that there is sort of an attack on masculinity, but also this rhetoric can really quickly devolve into like woman-hating incel type rhetoric. And so I don't know, there is a line there where yes, masculinity shouldn't be shamed, and everyone has masculinity and femininity in them. You're not 100% one or the other. I don't think that it should be shamed, but when people are talking about toxic masculinity, they're very clearly, very specifically talking about parts of masculinity that society has deemed to be very masculine and or desirable, but are actually toxic when it plays out in real life. In many cases, aggressiveness. Aggressiveness can be really praised in men, especially in sports, in leadership roles, in other situations, but you also don't want somebody who's then aggressive towards you and combative with you as a partner, because then that can go into like abuse territory. That would be toxic masculinity. Men mansplaining to you, constantly thinking that they're right. And I don't think that's all men. I don't even necessarily think that it's most men. But when we're talking about toxic masculinity, I would say that it is talking about a very specific thing. And there's an argument to be made that there's also, on the flip side of the coin, toxic femininity. I made a video about the princess treatment woman on TikTok, and I think she could be an example of that. Taking parts of what society would say is feminine, sometimes like childlike behavior, almost like this infantilization of yourself. I would say that's toxic femininity. That's not something that is inherent to being a woman. It's not something that means that if you're feminine, you're toxic or that you will be toxic. It's toxic parts of what society calls femininity, but it's really not. It's a social construct. It's just a label that we use to talk about it. It's not saying that it's toxic to be a man. It's weird to me that in response to this, instead of trying to gain understanding or start a dialogue, people like Doug Wilson try to really just hone in on why women are wrong, why feminism is a blight, and trying to say that there's nothing wrong with any form of masculinity, that they actually really try to lean into those more toxic ideals. It's a little frustrating to see that he's so close to getting the point and then completely missing it, but I do just want to point that out. There may be points of truth to what Doug is saying in this portion. Feel free to share in the comments if you agree with him on some of these like masculinity points, since I'm not a man. But once again, I think that he is way blowing it up, and then it's kind of veering into incel or like really hateful territory rather than coming from a place of trying to gain understanding.
If a boy acts like a boy in school, we hit him on the head with a chemical rock. We don't, because we don't know how to discipline them. We don't know how to make boys stand up straight. We don't know how to make them work hard. We don't know how to train boys as boys who are going to become men. One of the books that I wrote was called Future Men, because boyhood should be aimed at manhood.
I think that childhood should be equipped to developing the necessary skills to eventually launch into adulthood, but I don't think that's a gendered issue, and I do think that we should let children be children. And I do have some concerns that Doug's view on this would be more almost like child neglect, giving your kids a lot of responsibility, making them go through hard things, making them deal with their emotions alone. I feel like that's what he's more going into here. It worries me that he says little boys to be men. We should be preparing all children to have the necessary skills to launch into adulthood, but that doesn't mean giving them adult experiences as a child.
To be women, you have to train boys to be men. And if you don't do that and you spend your time attacking boys for masculine traits, they're gonna grow up to be pretty screwed up. And
right now, I mean, a lot of people believe that there's a masculinity crisis in the United States. Just when you look at the data of, school test scores, graduation rates, that kind of thing. Are you seeing
absolutely
more men be drawn to your church?
Yes.
Right now?
Yes. One of the things that is attractive to many of the people who have come here is that we're not apologetic about the masculinity that is present here. Now, neither are we apologetic for the femininity, but then as soon as you say masculinity, femininity, people say you're stereotyping.
Automatically, that type of language is going to make me ask, well, what does masculinity mean to you? What does that look like in your culture, your society, your community? What does femininity look like? What does it actually manifest as in your community? Because I think that femininity for a secular person is like a fun self-expression. If they are a more feminine presenting person, masculinity is a self-expression.
You're saying men are like this and women are like that. And I'd say, yep, we're stereotyping, guilty.
So what does that mean? What role do you think women play in society?
Women are the kind of people that people come out of.
So you just think they're meant to have babies. That's it. They're just a vessel.
No, it doesn't take any talent.
I have no words, so we're just going to have a moment of silence here together. All right.
To simply reproduce biologically. The wife and mother, who is the chief executive of the home, is entrusted with 3 or 4 or 5 eternal souls.
I truly don't have any words. Obviously, so many women can't have kids, and even if a woman can have kids and chooses to do so of her own volition, they're not just the type of people that people come out of. It's such a gross minimization of womanhood and who the experience that motherhood is. It really is diminishing.
I'm here as a working journalist, and I'm a mom of 3.
Good for you.
Is that an issue
No.
for you?
And no, it's not automatically an issue.
So, like, in your view of a Christian nation, a Christian America, would this be acceptable that I'm here as a working mom in Idaho?
Sure. Wouldn't
Okay.
be.
Okay.
Sure. This is the thing. There's a difference between what's a sin and a crime.
So once again, he's saying, yeah, it's fine because that will make him look better. The reality is that he doesn't want this to be socially acceptable. He is just saying, I want less government, I'm more libertarian, and so I don't want it to necessarily be illegal, which to me isn't much of a distinction, because I do think if people like Doug Wilson were in office, they would actually try to make it illegal or put in a ton of, parameters in place to make it more difficult to go to work if you're a mother. I think that they would make it more difficult to try to veer people in that direction and just essentially remove the option for women. That's just my viewpoint, but we'll hear what Doug has to say.
Okay, so in every society, there's certain things that are just, you don't let people do it. All right, it's a crime. It's against the law. Then there are things that I would advise people not to do pastorally. It'd be a pastoral advice. It wouldn't be a law, it wouldn't be a rule. If you have women who are domestic, talented, educated, and high-powered, and I'm related to a number of those, right? So my wife has written 8 or 9 books, and my daughters have written books. Both my daughters have written books. One daughter has edited an English curriculum, English lit curriculum, and they are a mother of 5 and a mother of 8.
How much you want to bet it's homeschool curriculum? I'm going to go look it up later, but I bet that it's homeschool curriculum. There's way less regulations and guidelines on homeschool curriculum, you guys. It's honestly insane. I have to do a video on homeschooling at some point, but I've been putting it off.
And they are full tilt domestic, and they are high energy, talented people.
It's also weird to me that he even feels the need to go into this because, to the viewers, we don't need examples of women who are smart and domestic. We all know people who have stayed home with the kids who are also really powerful women, awesome women, loving people, caring people who work hard, go back to work, whatever it may be. We all know a million examples of this. It's not like these examples of women are going to make him stand out more. And he's also talking about things that can very much be done at home. It seems like a lot of his books are self-published. So his daughter helping edit a book, that doesn't really mean a whole lot to me. She could have a homeschool education and no work history and then be able to edit that book for her dad while she has her kids at home. And that's not diminishing the work that she's doing, but that's also not a high power career woman. Okay. Not diminishing it. Not everybody wants to be a career woman. I, want to work, but I don't necessarily want to climb the ladder. That's not everybody's dream. So once again, I'm not diminishing it, but it's just weird to me that he's trying to give us these examples of powerful women when he's kind of talking about the lowest hanging fruit things that you can do in life, which would be to participate in editing your dad's book when he asks you to because you are unemployed.
I would say go team go. That's wonderful. At the same time, I don't want to disparage women who want to spend their time in the home, just focusing. I don't want to backhand it or disparage it at all. I want to honor that.
I want to honor that.
I want to honor that.
But you're comfortable with a working mom leaving the home and
Sure.
Okay.
I don't believe that he's comfortable with that. You guys let me know. I know that I'm kind of just reaching there. That's my own opinion, but I don't think that he really does mean that. I don't think that he wants women working outside of the home. And again, I think that if we allow Doug Wilson, people like him to continue to get, more power and recognition and political power, that is the direction things will start to go, that they'll start to try to make it more difficult to do those things. And I think that we already see that today.
So I'm a woman sitting across from you. Do you view me as an equal?
Oh, equal what? Equal person? Absolutely.
As an equal person with equal rights.
Equal person. So equal person, equality of citizenship, I would say, well, if you're a citizen, then there would be equality. But
summing up equality to equality of citizenship is kind of scary to me too, because it does show that he's maybe respecting the law more than he actually respects women. If that makes sense, he's really just saying, like, women are legally protected in the same way that I am. That doesn't tell me if he sees women as being equal to him.
God has created, in the first chapter of Genesis, male and female created he them. In the image of God, he created them. So man and woman complement one another and together represent the image of God. So, and that's...
But you don't believe husband and wife are equals.
Well, I don't think they have equal roles. It's like asking which is more equal, the violin or the bow. I'd say the violin or the bow. They're one instrument.
So this goes back to the equal in value, not in role conversation that we had earlier. So I'm not going to hit this too hard. I'm going to let him just keep talking. I'm just going to kind of like hit my main point again, which is that in general, I think that you could say everybody is equal in value, but not in role, because all of us have different strong suits. All of us have different histories, educational backgrounds, like different areas that we might bring more value than other people. I think that could be different for every person, and every person should be able to choose for themselves and have the same opportunities to do whatever they want to do. What he's saying isn't we have different roles, but we're equal in that way, as in like me and my friends all have different jobs, so we have different roles in the world, but we're all equal people. He's saying women's role is very, very defined, very clear-cut, and very rigid, very narrow. And so that's where I start to have an issue with it, because once again, not all people can work, right? And so not everybody's going to have the same role in that way. Maybe your role can't be to be a provider. Maybe it can't be to be a homemaker. That's okay. We have different roles, and yeah, I think that that's okay to just like understand the nuance. So once again, like I said earlier, I agree with it in a very, very broad sense, but the way that they actually apply this, it very quickly just becomes about gender roles. I think the way that I agree with it is that we give nobody roles. Like we just respect everybody's roles, and that's a very loose term. Obviously, when he says roles, he's talking about like an exact blueprint of how to live life. When I'm talking about roles, I'm talking about how your daily life kind of like manifests what you choose to spend your time doing.
The violin and bow is one instrument.
Right, but from what I've read about you and your interviews, you have said that you believe the wife should be submissive to the husband, and therefore that wouldn't be equal if the wife is submissive to the husband.
Well, it wouldn't be... For example, if you, at CNN, you've got bosses all the way up, and you make a distinction, as you ought to, between your equality with them as a human being and the fact that they happen to have authority over you in this job. A person can say, my boss is my equal, as human beings are concerned. We should both have a right to a fair trial. We should both have the right to keep and bear arms. We should both have the right to free speech. But when I go into work, he has the right to tell me what to do, and I don't have the right to tell him what to do.
And I could agree with that, except for that they're saying that women could never be in this leadership role. And I've talked about this in other videos before. A lot of relationships, a lot of people have somebody take more of like a dominant role, or I hate the words because I am not using them obviously like in a sexual way, but like more dominant or submissive roles, more leadership or helpmeet roles. I don't think that that goes by gender. I know tons of relationships where the woman is definitely more of the leader, manages the finances, makes the decisions. And I know people where it's like switched and where people feel more comfortable that way. And I think that it just depends on what your relationship is like, your trust with each other, your experience with things, like your comfortability. There are so many different reasons that you could take on these roles, and him saying that you have a boss and you're agreeing to sign up for that dynamic, yeah, that makes sense. But her boss isn't just inherently her boss because he's a man. Her boss is her boss because of merit because of the hard work he's put in, because of his career, and she could potentially be in her boss's position someday and get that role. The issue with these relationships is that you can't leave the job, you can't leave the marriage, you can't question the authority, there's no HR, right? Like, there's none of these protections in place for the person, you cannot quit, you have the ability to assume those roles. It's based on your experience and your talent and what you actually bring to the table. It's not you get one look at you and say, yeah, you're a woman, so you'll never be in that role. What he's talking about is it's just not an equal comparison.
So
That's a dynamic you see in marriage.
yeah, within the confines of marriage, the husband is the head, the wife is submissive, his helpmeet. And when you enter into this, it's a believing Christian man and a believing Christian woman, both of whom want that arrangement.
Is the wife the proper?
I say this in all my videos, you guys. Once again, I don't care what dynamics you have in your relationship. Just make sure that it's healthy, that it works for you, that it's healthy, that it's safe, that it is equal in whatever that looks like for you. Equal doesn't necessarily mean, you know what you might do different chores. Maybe one of you does stay at home, so you do more of the homemaking and the other person does more. Like, it doesn't need to be exactly equal, but make sure that you're not being taken advantage of. But if you are a Christian man or you are a Christian woman and you know what you're getting into, you want that specific type of dynamic in your relationship and it feels right for you, I don't really have any issue with that. I don't care if you want to be submissive to your husband. I just really don't care about that. I don't think there's necessarily anything inherently wrong with that. If you're choosing it on your own, if you are choosing it being informed, and if you're marrying someone who's willing to be flexible with you and take your views, your emotions, your beliefs seriously if you're going to change in the future, because you don't want to be stuck in a situation where somebody feels like they're your boss. That's not a healthy dynamic to have in marriage.
Property of the husband,
Oh,
essentially?
No.
No. Okay.
No. The wife is, as Paul says in Galatians 3:28, in Christ there's neither Jew nor Greek, slave or free, male or female. So in Christ, before God, worshiping God, there's absolute equality between men and women.
But your view is, in the household, the dynamic between a husband and wife is one of where the wife is submissive to the husband. And what
Correct.
does that look like in practice? Can the wife say no to the husband?
Under certain circumstances, she must say no to her husband. So,
Like what?
So, as I'm fond of telling our people, no human authority on earth is absolute. The civil authority is not absolute. It's a true authority, but it's not absolute. There are times when you disobey the magistrate. The authority of the church, pastors and elders, is true human authority.
They're so non-specific, and it's hard because I remember being a Christian and I remember watching people like Doug Wilson, and you might think, oh, this sounds good, this sounds right. And then you think about, how do I actually apply this to my life? What Doug is saying is a whole bunch of nothing. He's basically saying, well, women can say no because, like, if a crime is being committed, they shouldn't participate in that, and then they would have to say no to their husband. Well, we're not asking about if a crime is being committed. We're asking about in daily life, if a wife feels like, you know, a husband says, we're moving. Can she just say, no, we're not. I'm not moving. We need to talk about this. Let's sit on it. We're talking about daily life practical application. Does the woman have any sort of power in her own life? Does she have any sort of decision making? We're not asking about, does a woman have to say no if her allegedly Christian husband wants her to help him drug traffic? Okay, that's like not what we're talking about. But they use these extreme examples because it's easy to come up with an answer where you're like, yeah, that's obviously, yeah. So she should say no in those circumstances. But in daily life, your Christian husband is probably more likely to be like emotionally abusing you than to be like trying to commit crimes.
There are times when a wife should tell him respectfully to pound sand.
As you well know, there have been claims
Oh, I know.
that you
Yes.
have minimized or sort of brushed under the rug sexual abuse and violence.
Yes, there have been claims of that nature, and I would say, look at them go. Let them say what they say. It's simply false. So we
Helped a pedophile.
Well, I conducted the marriage ceremony, but I did do that. So, but I didn't set them up. I didn't arrange for it. I didn't all the things you hear online that I did in that situation.
So why would you marry off a pedophile?
Because it was legal. He is a professing Christian. The woman he married understood his background, understood what she was getting into. I didn't arrange it. It was not an arranged marriage. It was not pressured. It was nothing like that. But basically, when someone, one of the things that people don't realize.
So he can do a marriage ceremony for a pedophile, but he can't do one for a gay couple, because that's where it gets confusing to me. Like, if he was like, look, I do all marriage ceremonies, I leave that up to the, I still disagree with it, but I could see an argument to be made there. But he also does reject couples for being gay. So it's like, you see literal pedophilia is worse. I just don't understand people like him. It's just disgusting.
This is what pastors actually have to deal with. Pastors are helping people.
On homosexuality, I mean, the Bible talked about stoning as punishment.
Right.
Would you endorse punishing someone who is gay in the America you want to be living in?
This brings up another old controversy. King Asa in Israel and King Jehoshaphat, both in modern parlance, they both closed the bathhouses. They shut it down. And they exiled, they said, all done with that, and exiling homosexuals. And the scripture praises both men for doing that, which means that the requirement for the death penalty that does exist in Leviticus, that requirement was not a minimum penalty, but was a maximum penalty, because scripture praises the kings who didn't execute the homosexuals. They just shut the orgy down. They just shut the party down. So there is latitude in the application of biblical law. There is latitude in how it's applied.
This kind of language talking about how he has more of a progressive view because he doesn't want to stone people to death, it just doesn't land the way that I think he thinks that it will. Let me know if you guys have a different interpretation of that. We've got a few minutes left of this interview. Yeah, and it kind of stays just as shocking throughout. But yeah, his rhetoric here is really horrendous, and he's really saying things in an unclear way intentionally to not make it clear what he's saying. But for the people that know, they know. These are signals to people what he is really trying to get at, and I think that it's terrifying.
I began ministering in 1977, in the late 70s and early 80s, and sodomy was a felony in all 50 states. That America of that day was not a totalitarian hellhole.
So you would like America to go back to that?
Yep.
And someone watching this might be like, you want to control behavior?
Because he's a man, he's a straight white man, so when he thinks back, he wasn't affected by anything. It sounds like this is just a man who really doesn't like other people and wants to create this really separatist, exclusionary group.
Behavior in the bedroom?
Well, yeah. Well, I have the advantage of having built my own house, and people like to say that liberals don't care what you do in your bedroom, but the state had opinions about how thick the sheetrock had to be in the bedroom, how far apart the sheetrock screws had to be, how big the window had to be for egress, and whether or not I could take the mattress off the tag. What do you mean the government doesn't care what happens in the bedroom?
Yeah, so obviously there are going to be laws, things need to be done up to code, you're supposed to keep your mattress tag on. We're not talking about that. This is once again another example of these type of people like Jordan Peterson, where they try to make these really broad statements or use metaphors that do not compare. You can't talk about the government regulating sexual behavior and the government wanting to make sure that your house is built up to code. It's not the same.
They regulate.
And that goes to your sort of libertarian.
That's exactly it. Yeah. So I think that you have to budget for the fact that Christ came and transformed the world. So when Christ died, the Old Testament law was crucified with him, and the Old Testament law rose again from the dead with him, but rose again transformed.
And the family, the church, and the civil government buckets, where does the poor fit in helping the poor and the needy and the most vulnerable? Would that be up to the church or the civil government?
It'd be up to families and the church, and I would say as a final safety net, the civil government.
Okay. Because I know R.J. Rushdoony, in many ways, he thought the church should take on that role.
Yes, but for example, in the Old Testament, the civil government, the gleaning laws, for example, where you left part of your field for the poor to glean and get sustenance, that's the sort of thing that the civil government could say, we want you to do that.
And you basically think the civil government should stay out of the business of the family unit that you
Yes.
see as its own sort of
The family
enterprise.
the family is the Ministry of Health, Education, and Welfare.
That's terrifying. The family is not the Ministry of Health, Education, and Welfare, and children need to get regular health checks. They should be checked in on by other adults to make sure that they're not in abusive situations. All children are deserving of adequate education, and if you can do that through homeschooling, then that's excellent, but not everyone can do that. Not every kid can learn in that setting. And so, yeah, every child is deserving of an adequate education. It would also be incredible if the church actually did step up in communities, but personally, at least in the communities that I have lived in, I have not ever personally benefited from being in a church, nor have I benefited from a local community church. If anything, when I see churches out and about, they are doing things like picketing or holding up signs at Planned Parenthoods and are being extremely inconvenient and hateful, honestly. And so it would be nice if the church did step up, and I like what he's saying about, the church should be helping first. Sure. I mean, do I agree with that? No, I do think that there should be safety nets in place in the government, but I would love if the church stepped up and met those needs for people. But the reality is that the church just doesn't. We see mega churches, and then, a block over, it's lined with homeless people. And we see this all over, especially in big cities like LA. The church is not stepping up. If anything, people feel more hated by the Christian church than they do by other religions or by secularism.
The church is the ministry of grace and peace, or the ministry of word and sacrament, and the civil government is the ministry of justice.
Do you still believe what you said back in the 90s, that there's a mutual affection between master and slave?
Yes, it depends on which master and which slave you're talking about. Slavery was overseen and conducted by fallen human beings, and there were horrendous abuses, and there were also people who owned slaves who were decent human beings. And
so I'm just curious. So he's saying that the Bible talks about positive slavery, but whenever the Bible uses slavery as more of like an adjective, it's never used in a positive way. So I just don't see where this argument is for whatever. And then he's talking about American history too. This has been so debunked. This is another talking point that we hear from people that are in these spaces like Pearl Davis, saying that slavery wasn't really that bad, and it's horrific, and it's uneducated, and it's just ridiculous all around, and it's just inaccurate. But I'll just let Doug dig his grave right now.
didn't mistreat them.
But do you think by even saying that, that's minimizing the just sheer barbarity and brutality of using human beings based on the color of their skin as property?
Yeah, I think that system of chattel slavery was an unbiblical system, and I'm grateful it's...
We're gonna have to end it there. Thank you guys so much for watching this. I know this one was a longer one today, but I know that the CNN interview has been really highly requested and watched, and it's something that I did want to dig into because he does really parrot a lot of these Christian nationalist talking points that we've talked about in other videos. I made a video about Christian nationalism with Charlie Kirk, and then also one about Jordan Peterson. I will actually link these in the end cards if you guys want to go ahead and watch those, because I think they're a really great follow-up to this topic where I dive more into what they're saying and why they're saying it and why they believe it. In this video, it's more just reactionary. I've been doing a few of these reaction style videos, and you guys seem to like them a lot more than like my documentary style videos. So let me know if that's the case, if you'd like to see one or the other more. Please comment on this video. If you don't know what to comment but you want to support, you can always comment a white dove because that's my logo, or some kind of other bird. I'll probably respond back to you with a few white hearts. Like this video, subscribe or double check to make sure that you're subscribed if you're not already. Hit share and copy link. You don't have to send it anywhere, I promise, but it helps way more than you think that it does. I'm having a really good time making these videos and being back from vacation. You guys have asked me how I'm making so many of these videos, and yeah, how the output is insane. And that is because I'm treating this literally like a full-time job. I'm working 8, 10, 12 hours a day on researching, on recording, on videos, on editing. I'm doing all of this myself. Yeah, so it is time consuming, but that's how I'm doing these videos so quickly. If you guys want to support me more, you guys can become members to my channel. It does help a lot to have the memberships. So if you want to go check that out, you'll get access to some additional things, priority comment responses, earlier videos, and things like that. So you can go check that out and see. It's just a couple dollars a month depending on the tier. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
I'm a chain smoker. Do I believe in God? Well, that's no fun. Absolutely not. No. He'd tear me to shreds. Tanius, I like to go on trips. I don't care. Let's go to Vegas. Let's gamble.
Throw some seed up on this saw. I used to smoke some stuff off oil. Now I'm filled with oil. I used to hate some people bad. I used to get big mad with brass knuckles in my bag. Now the Bible's what I have. Yeah. Got favored up. Salt on me, I got flavored up. Me and God got paired up. Holy Ghost got me layered up. Like fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience. Cut that bad stuff off and cast it back out to Satan. Holy Ghost, I just want you to know that you're my best friend. I'm all in. I give you full control. Take me captive. Every thought I have is Christ-like. Submit myself to God, resist the devil, and he's all like, yeah.